Hey friends, what's up? And welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Beis, Daf 32 of Masechta Ksubis, friends. In today's Daf, it raises the question of what happens when you have two sort of competing liabilities. One is that you have to pay money for something that you did, and the other is that you have to get malchus, lashes, for something that you did. So which one do you get? You're only going to get one of them. Is it going to be are you going to have to pay, or are you going to have to get whipped? Friends, that's the shaila. What do you think? It's machlekes. So, says the Gemara, and the Maisa, I have to leave to the airport in an hour and 40 minutes, and I have to record Babylon Talmud, and I haven't packed yet. So, here we go. Alright, so, says the Gemara in Daf Lamed Aleph from Beis. So our Mishnah had said that that if a fellow, sleeps with one of the arayis, right? So it's ones or mefate, and so it's a chiyuv karis. But also, still the fine applies, right? You have to pay 50 shekels. So, Eluin alokin. Now, viraminu, we have a kasha from Masechta Makis. It says in Masechta Makis that Eluin alokin, these are the people who get whipped. Habala choso, somebody sleeps with his sister. Vala chosoviv, the sister of his father. Vala chos imo, the sister of his mother. Vala achos ishto, the sister of his wife. It's like we're back in Masechta Yavamis over here. Val eishes achiv, his brother's wife. Val eishes achiv, his father's brother's wife. Val anida or anida. Alright, so, no. So, in any of these cases, so we had said in our Mishnah that you'd be chayiv to pay the fine of 50 shekels. Now, we also are saying in a Mishnah in Masechta Makis that you have to whip them. Now, v'kaimlan dein loko mishalim. Now, in general, we hold that you don't get malchus and also have to pay money. So we have two conflicting sort of things over here. On the one hand, we're saying that they have to pay the 50 shekel fine, and the other one we're saying that they get makis, but you won't get both. So how is it? I don't understand. One place we're saying money, one place we're saying whipping, but you won't get both. But apparently it is both. What do we do? So so we're going to see two ways to understand this, right? We're going to see basically, well, no, let's not say that. Omer Ula says Ula lo kasha, it's no problem. Kan ba'achoso naira, kan ba'achoso bogeris. Oh. So Ula wants to say, look, that the Mishnah in Ksubis, our Mishnah in Ksubis that says that you have to pay a fine, and the Mishnah in Makis, which says that you get whipped, those are talking about two different scenarios. In Masechta Ksubis, as it said explicitly in the Mishnah, it's talking about a naira, right? That a naira, somebody, according to a mayor at least, right? But dafka by a naira from 12 to 12 and a half. By ones umafate, so then there's this knas. But the Mishnah in Masechta Makis, which is saying that they get whipped, so that's by a bogeris, because right from 12 and a half and older. So if she's a bogeris, so then he doesn't pay the fine for a bogeris, only for a naira, and according to Chacham for a ketana also, but by a bogeris not. So there would be no fine. But so in that case, there's no fine. There would be makis. There would be lashes. So that's how Ula says it. He says, look, they're talking about two different things. In Masechta Ksubis, we're talking about a naira, and in Masechta Makis, we're talking about a bogeris. Fine. Achosu bogeris nami, but fact the Gemara, 1 second. But also achosu bogeris, hoika boshe sufgam, ua. But by a bogeris also, maybe there's not the fine, maybe there's no 50 shekels fine, but there's other things. Boshes, right? She's embarrassed. Ufgam, right, or sort of her value goes down after this, right? So if that's sort of evaluated based on theoretically if she would be a slave woman, so then how much would her value decrease in the market based on this experience? So fact the Gemara. So even by a bogeris, even though there wouldn't be the 50 shekels fine. But there are other payments that he would be liable for. So how could he be liable for those payments like Boshes and Pagam? while at the same time receiving lashes. I thought we don't do financial and physical, right? We don't do lashes and money. So b'shota. So the Gemara answers, well, a shota, right? If she's a shota, if she's I don't know, foolish, dumb, I don't know, but she's unable, right? So she doesn't have, I guess, intellect to realize that she's embarrassed, or I guess it wouldn't affect her value. So in those cases, so boshes and pagam is irrelevant. So she's a bogeres, so there's no knas, there's no boshes, and there's no pagam because she's a shota. So therefore she would get lashes. V'ikatzayra. But what about the fact that there is tsar, right? I mean, she might be a shota, but there's sort of physical pain, and that she gets paid for, and that would even be by a shota as well. Well, bimefuta, it's talking about where she was seduced, where it was consensual, and because it was consensual, so then there was no pain or anything. Right? It was consensual. So in that case, because it was consensual, so then there's no fine, and she's a bogeres, so there's no fine, and also it was consensual, so there's no boshes, tsar, any of that stuff, and therefore all there is makis. Once we're talking about it being consensual, you can even say that it's talking about a naira, right? You can even say that it's talking about a naira, and biyasoma umefuta, and it's talking about a yasoma, right? That it's an orphan, so all the money would go to her, theoretically, right? She doesn't have parents, she doesn't have a father that the money would go to, so it goes to her. But because it was mefuta, because it was consensual, so then there are none of these fines or sheves or boshes or repor or whatever, because it was consensual, and therefore she wouldn't receive any money there either, and you could say that in that case there would be makas. So now, says the Gemara, Almok Savar Ula Kolecha de Ika Momenu Malkis Mamonu Mishalim Milkololaki. So says the Gemara, from what was the premise of the Gemara? The premise of the Gemara was, I don't understand, how could it be that you get Malkis and Mammon, right? We had to find the situation that in order, right, where we could find a situation where there's no Mammon, there's no financial obligations at all. And since there's no monetary obligations, that is why the fellow would receive makis, since there's no financial obligations. Implying, though, that if there would be financial obligations, right, we'd have to find a situation where there are no financial obligations for him to be chay makis. But if there were financial obligations, so then there wouldn't be makis. So let's read that again. So Almok Sover Ula, so we see that Ula seems to be holding that Kolecha Dika Mamin Umalkis, that in a situation where there would be both Mamin and Makis, Mamona Mashala Milkololaki, so then, right, of course we know that you wouldn't get both, you wouldn't get Makis and financial requirements. So from the fact that we have to search for a situation where there's no financial obligations in order to say that you'd be chayiv makis, so then it must be that when there are financial obligations, so then he would be chayiv mammon and not makis. So minale leula ha. So how does Ula know this? From where does Ula know that whenever you have a situation where there's a chiyuv mammon and a chiyuv makis, that you would pay rather than get the makis? He learns it out from a fellow who hurts, who hits, who damages, causes damage to a friend by hitting him. So just like by somebody who damages his friend, who hits his friend, the ika mammon umalkis, that by chova b'chavero there is mammon and malkis, right? As the pasuk says, rak shivto yitein v'rapo yirape, right? It talks about how he's got to pay him for the damages, and it also for what he did. But also it says lo Yosef pentosif, right? It says basically that's the pasuk where we learn at the lav that you're not allowed to hit a friend, you're not allowed to hit somebody. So, and if you do, you're violating a law, and you be chayiv makis. So we see that when it comes to chova b'chavero, there are two things. You're chayiv financial obligations to pay him for the damage that you did to him, but there's also your chayiv makis for violating a law of lo yosef ben tosef, right? What does the pasuk say? No. Lo Yosef, yeah. What does it say? Lo Yosef ben Tosef, right? Lo Yosef ben Yosef, la'akoso alele zeu. So that's the law that we learn out, that you're not allowed to hit somebody. So it would sound like there's financial sort of obligations and also a law which would imply makis. So dikamamu makis mamon mishalim milkolo laki. And yet, when it comes to chova b'chavero, what's the conclusion? What's the halacha? That you pay him for the damages, you don't get makis for having hit your friend. So So any place where you have two parallel obligations, one financial and one makis, so you pay the financial obligation, you don't get makis. So therefore, that's why Ula was dafka searching for a situation where there were no financial obligations at all, and only then would he be chayiv makis. But if there were financial obligations, then he would be chayiv the financial obligations, the mammon, not the makis. So we said, how does he know that? So we know from chova b'chavero, because by chova b'chavero there's both mammon and makis, and he pays the mammon, not the makis. But now, so the Gemara has sort of an interesting position right now, which is that it's assuming for whatever reason that mammon is more stringent than makis. Now, I imagine if you would ask me, what would you rather? Pay some money or get whipped? My gut is to say I'd rather just pay. Whipping seems like a mess. I have to assume I'd rather get paid. I'd rather pay, right? Just pay my way out of it. So interestingly, so even though I would have thought that mammon would be considered a more lenient punishment than whipping, than makis, but the Gemara seems to be assuming, at least initially, that it's punkt fakert, that it's the opposite, that mammon is actually more stringent than makis. So frek the Gemara, but ma'al chova b'chaver shekin chayiv b'chamisha dvarim. 1 second. So we just said that by chova b'chaver, a fellow hits his friend, a fellow hits another fellow. So we say over there, there's financial sort of punishments, and there's also he violated a law, so there's also makis, and we say that he pays, he doesn't get hit, right? So we see mammon wins out there. Now we're assuming right now that mammon is more stringent than makis, and we also wanted to say that just like by chova b'chavero, the punishment is mammon, so also in any situation like by ones u'mefata, also the punishment would be money, it would not be makis. But now, 1 second, but maybe the only reason why we take the stringent route and say that by chova b'chavero he's chayiv mammon rather than makis is ma'al chova b'chavero shekin chayiv b'chamisha dvarim. Chova b'chavero, a fellow hits another fellow, that's a particularly stringent case to begin with, because you chayiv for 5 things, right? Nezek, shar, tsar, ripoy, boshes, Nezek, Tsar, Sheves, Ripoy, and Boshes. I think maybe that's the right order. Nezek, Tsar, Ripoy, Sheves, and Boshes. So you're chayiv for 5 things. So it makes chova b'chavero a particularly stringent case to begin with. Therefore, I can understand why we're also stringent in the punishment and saying that he's chayiv to pay rather than getting makis. And therefore, just because by chova b'chavero you have to pay, that doesn't mean that by other cases, for example, by onus mufate, he would pay. Maybe when there's mammon and makis, maybe by chova b'chavero you'd get makis. And if you want to say punkt fakert, if you want to say that, right, that money is actually more lenient than makis, which is what I would assume to begin with, but then I can also argue, fine. So even if we say that, right, that money is more lenient than makis, still, I could make the opposite argument, which is that chova b'chaveros are particularly lenient. case, and therefore I would understand why we'd be lenient by chova b'chavera. How come chova b'chavera is lenient? Shekein huter michlala bebezdin, because there are instances where you're actually allowed to hit. Where are you allowed to hit? Bezdin's allowed to give makis, is allowed to administer makis. So we see that there are instances where hitting is allowed, as opposed to like onus umufata. There's never an instance where onus umufata is allowed, right? So therefore I can understand. So even if you want to say that, right, that mammon is more lenient than makis, and so then the fact that we have mammon by chova b'chavero, I wouldn't be able to apply that to other instances more generally, because chova b'chavero, I can make the argument that it's a more lenient case to begin with, in that hitting is something that there are instances in which it's allowed. It's not something that's always forbidden. So therefore I can understand why we could take the more lenient approach. So therefore, we can't apply the halachos of chova b'chavero more generally. Because if you say, right, because the outcome by chova b'chavero is that you pay mammon and rather than makis. But if we say that mammon is more stringent than chova b'chavero, then I can make the argument that chova b'chavero generally is a more stringent case than other cases. And if you say that mammon is more lenient, I don't know if I said what I said. If we say that mammon is more stringent than makis, then I can make the argument that chova b'chavero is a more stringent case to begin with. And if we say that mammon is more lenient than makis, I could also make the argument to say that chova b'chavero is a more lenient case in general, because there are instances where you're allowed to hit. So ela gomer me'edim zomim. So rather, we learn out this principle, Ula learns out this principle from edim zomim. The principle that when there's mammon and makis, you do mammon rather than makis. What's edim zomim? Who could tell me what edim zomim is? I can't remember if we had it recently, but edim zomamin is a situation where you have witnesses, right? Witnesses come to Bezdin and they say, Reuven owes Shimon 200 zuz, as we're going to see a little bit later, right? Reuven owes Shimon 200 zuz, but the truth is they're making it up. They're making it out of thin air. It never happened. And then two other witnesses come, and essentially there's a template, right? Imono Yisuf Makom Ploni, that basically they're proven to be liars. And what ends up happening is the liars are chayiv to do what they were trying to do to their victim. So if they were trying to make Reuven pay Shimon 200 zuz, so they have to pay Reuven 200 zuz. That's Edim Zomim. So by Edim Zomim, the ikomamin umalkis, that by Edim Zomim, so for example, where they were trying to make Reuven have to pay Shimon 200 zuz. So it says Vasisim lo kasher zomam. So you do to these witnesses what they tried to do to Reuven. So what were they trying to do? They're trying to make him pay money. So we make them pay money to Reuven. So there's a financial implication, but it also says Losana Brecha et Shoker, that do not be a false witness. And they were false witnesses, and they violated the law of Losana Brecha et Shoker, which means that they should be chayiv makis. So we see that by Edim Zomin, there's financial obligations, but also makis, also lashes. Mamona Mishali Milkulalaki. And we say what? That they pay Reuven, they don't receive lashes. So Avkolecha Dika Mamonu Malkis Mamona Mishali Milkulalaki. So we want to say that just like by Edim Zomin, where there's Mammon and Makis, they pay Mammon. So also we'll say that by any case, like Onis Umafata, for example, that there's a Mammon option and a Malkis option, you would, the default would be Mammon rather than Makis. But fact the Gemara, 1 second. If we assume that mammon is more stringent than makis, that by edim zomin it's a particularly stringent case to begin with, in that they get punished, edim zomin get punished without any warning. Right? In general, you need a warning to get punished, but over here, edim zomin are getting punished without any kind of warning. We don't warn them that, hey, if you lie, then you're going to get in trouble. So that makes Edim Zomin a particularly stringent case to begin with, so I can understand why they get the stringent penalty or punishment of mammon. And if you want to make the opposite argument, that money is actually more lenient than makis, well then I can make the argument that Edim Zomin is actually, that there's reason to be more lenient by Edim Zomin, shekain lo asu maise, that they didn't do anything. They spoke, they used their mouth, but they didn't do anything, they didn't cause any physical damage, they didn't really do anything with their bodies. They spoke. That's what they did. So therefore I can understand, I can make the argument that we take it easy on them and give them mammon rather than makis, because all they did was sort of use their mouth rather than actually do something physically bad. So I can understand why we could be lenient. So we have the case of Chova B'Chaver. We have the case of Eidim Zomim. By both of those cases, there's a Mammon option, there's a Malchus option, and we give, and we say that they're Chayiv Mammon, they're not Chayiv Malchus. But in each of those cases, we say that we can't necessarily apply them, generally, because if we say that Mammon is more stringent, in both of those cases, I can argue that, well, those are more stringent cases. And if Mammon is more lenient, I can make the argument by both of them that those cases are Dafka, more lenient cases than other cases. So Elo Gomer Mitarvayu. But rather, the end of the day is that we have two cases where we have Mammon and Makis, and the punishment is Mammon rather than Makis. Ma'atzada Shava Sheboin, what both Eidim Zomim and Chova B'Chaveru share in common is the Ika Mammon U'Malkis, that there's a Mammon option and a Malchus option, Mamona Mishal and Milkal Olaki, and the sort of conclusion is, the result is that they pay money, they do not receive lashes, and therefore we want to say that in any place where there's both a Mammon option and a Malchus option, the punishment would be Mammon, it would not be Makis. Perfecti Gemara. Mala tzara shava sheboyin sheken yesh boyin tzar chomer v'mamona lekulau sheken yesh boyin tzar akal. But 1 second, you can't just generalize from Eidim Zomim and Chova B'Chavero as a group, because that group of Eidim Zomim and Chova B'Chavero both have characteristics that make them more stringent than other cases, and both have characteristics that make them more lenient than other cases. But other cases sort of are just normal cases that aren't more particularly stringent and aren't particularly lenient, and therefore, if you want to say that Mammon is more stringent, so I'll say, well, Chova B'Chavero and Eidim Zomim are more stringent cases. And if you want to say that Mammon is more lenient, I can make the argument that Chova B'Chavero and Eidim Zomim are more lenient cases. So we can't necessarily apply from Chova B'Chavero and Eidim Zomim more generally to any other case where you have both a Chiyuv Mammon and a Chiyuv Makis to say that you'd be Chayiv Mammon. Ella Ula Tachas Gomer. Rather, Ula learns out from a Gzeire Shove. Ksivacha Tachas Asher Ino, it says by Ones, that Tachas Asher Ino, because he violated this girl, Uchsivasam, and it says by Chova B'Chavero, Ayin Tachas Ayin. Ma'hosum Mamona Mishal Milkal Olaki. So just like by Chova B'Chavero, it's Mammon rather than Makis. Av kolecha dika Mamona Umalkis. Also, any place where there's Mammon and Makis, Mamona Mishal Milkal Olaki, Davka, you would pay money, you don't get Makis. So finally, that is where Ula learns out his premise from. That when you have Makis and you have Mammon, you pay Mammon, you don't receive Makis. He learns that out from the Gzeir Shava of Tachas. So that was the opinion of Ula, right? So Ula says when you have Mammon and Makis, you do Mammon, not Makis. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Afilutema Achoso Naire, says Rabbi Yochanan that you can actually say that the Mishnah in Makis that says that, by your sister, you get lashes, says Rabbi Yochanan, you can even say that it's talking about a naira. That our Mishnah had said in Ksubis that a naira, there's a fine of 50 shekels, and we have a Mishnah in Makis that says that she gets Makis rather than paying the 50 shekels. So how could this be? So Kanchi Hisru Bo, Kanchilo Hisru Bo. So they could both be talking about where she's a naira, but it depends. If they warned him, hey, don't do this, and if you do it, so then you're going to be Chayiv Makis, so then he gets Makis. But if they didn't warn him, so then he pays the fine. Alma Kasav Rabbi Yochanan. So what do we see? So we see that Rabbi Yochanan holds punkt fakert from Ula. Kol echad de'ika mammon u'malkis, that whenever you have a monetary option and a makis option, ve'asube, and they warned him, milkalaki mamonu lo mishalim, so you get makis, you won't get mammon, you won't pay. So Rabbi Yochanan says, look, when there's, by onus mufata, there's the 50 shekels, but there's also makis, so it depends. If you warned him, hey, if you do this, you're going to be chayiv makis, so then there's makis. But if they didn't warn him, so then there's the 50 shekel fine. So minada the Rabbi Yochanan ha. How does Rabbi Yochanan know this? On my Qur'an, the pasuk says Kidei Rishaso. The pasuk says that we give him makis Kidei Rishaso, like the nudniki thing that he did. Nudniki thing, singular. Mishum Risha Achas Atam Mechayvo. Yatam Mechayvo Mishum Shtei Rishayos. That you only get him in trouble for one thing, not for two things. V'samachlei, and it says right after that, Arboim Yakenu, that you give him 40 makis, that you hit him 40 times, that you whip him 40 times. So we see that it says Kidei Rishaso, which is singular, implying that when you have two things, money and makis, you're only going to do one of them. And then it says right after that, Arboim Yakenu, that you administer 40 lashes. The implication being that when you have an option between mammon and makis, and you can only, right, he's only going to be chayiv for one of them, the answer is Arboim Yakenu. The answer is that he's going to be chayiv makis rather than mammon. But one second, what about chova b'chavero? Chova b'chavero, there's mammon, right? Shivto yite and vrapo yirape. There's also makis, which is lo Yosef pen Yosef, right? So we have makis and we also have mammon by chova b'chavero, and mamon mishal milko lo laki. That taka he pays, he doesn't get whipped. And if you're going to say, oh, that's because by chova b'chavero they didn't warn him, that's why he pays money rather than gets whipped. Aval asube milko laki. But if they would have warned him, of course he would get makis. Mamona milko laki, mamona lo mashalim. You would get makis, he wouldn't pay. But that's not true. V'amar Reb Ami, Amar Reb Yochanan, Reb Ami taka said the name of Reb Yochanan, he ko akoya she'en ba shave pruta, that if one fellow smites another fellow a hit that is worth less than a pruta, loke, so then he gets makis. Okay, so if Reuven hits Shimon, but he incurred less than a pruta's worth of damage, so then he gets makis. So we hit Reuven, we whip Reuven. Heichidami, now what's the case? Idlo asube, if they didn't warn Reuven, amai loke, then why is he going to get makis? Elo pshita da asube. It must be that they taka warned him. V'taima teleis bashvei pruta, and the reason why we're going to whip Reuven is because he didn't incur a pruta's worth of damages to Shimon. Ha'izbei shava pruta, but if there would be a pruta's worth of damage, mamonu mishalim milko lo laki, then he would pay Shimon money, he would not get makis. So we see that by chovel b'chavero, right, even in a situation where Reuven was warned that he might get makis for hitting Shimon, we see that only if it was less than a shavar pruta would be chayiv makis. But if there was a shavar pruta, i.e., if there was a financial option, right, if there was financial value to the damage that he incurred, then he would pay money. He would not get makis. So then, how could Rabbi Yochanan be saying that taka when there's mammon and makis, he gets makis? So Kida Amar Rabbi Illa, it's like Rabbi Illa said. Befeirush rib sator edim zomin l'tashlumin. Just like Rabbi Illa, and we're going to see Rabbi Illa in a second, but just like Rabbi Illa said that by edim zomimin, specifically the Torah says that the chayiv mammon rather than makis, hachanami here also by chovo b'chavero, befeirush rib sator chovo b'chavero l'tashlumin. That the Torah says specifically that by chovo b'chavero, that when Reuven hits Shimon, he's going to be chayiv money, as long as it's a shavar pruta, he's going to be chayiv money rather than makis. Veicha itmar Rabbi Illa. Now, where did Rabbi Illa say this? Where did Rabbi Illa say that by Edom Zomim the dafka chayiv mammon and not makis? Aha, on the following: Midin anu es ish ploni, that we the witnesses are testifying about Reuven shechayiv lachavero masayim zuz, that he owes Shimon 200 zuz, v'nimtzu zomim, and they turned out to be Edom Zomim. Lokinu mishaman, so they get malchus and they have to pay the 200 zuz back to Reuven that they tried to make him lose. Shelo Hashema mevion lidei makis, mevion lidei tashlum divrei Reb Meir. The Reb Meir says that since there are two different psukim that they violated, one is v'asisim lo kasher zomam, that you do to them like they tried to do. They tried to make Reuven pay Shimon 200 zuz, so they have to pay Reuven 200 zuz. But they also violated the pasuk of Losana Be'achei Chaka, which is a completely different pasuk, and therefore they have to get makis for that. So according to Reb Meir, they would get both makis and mammon, but the chachamim say kol mishalim eino loka. that no, since they have to pay Reuven 200 zuz, the 200 zuz that they tried to make him lose, they have to now pay him. So Eino Loka, they're not going to get Makis. Why don't we say Punkt Vakert? Why don't we say that we definitely give them Makis, but they don't need to pay anything to Reuven? It says Rabbi Illa that while the Torah specifically says that Edom Zomin in this case would pay rather than get Makis. Where does the Torah say that they would pay? Well, Michdei. Let's see. Ksiv, the pasuk says, "Vasifsim lo kasher zomim lasus lo. The pasuk says that you do to the witnesses what they tried to do to Reuven. They tried to make Reuven pay Shimon 200 zuz, so they have to pay Reuven 200 zuz. Yod b'yod lamali. So why do I need it to say hand to hand? If it already says that you'll do to them whatever they tried to do, so yod b'yod. If they tried to make him lose a hand, they lose a hand. So davar niton miyad liyad. What it teaches is something that doesn't mean literally a hand, but it means something that's given from one hand to another hand. Umaynihu mammon. That is money. So we see that the Avka, it says yad b'yad when it comes to Edom Zomin, to say that when you have the option of Vasisim lo kasher Zomin, which is financial, and Losana Berecha Chako, which is Makis, Dafka, it's yad liyad to teach you that Dafka we go with mammon rather than Makis. Chova b'chaveru nami, and also by Chova b'chaveru, specifically the Torah says that you be chayav mammon rather than Makis. Michdei, the pasuk says kasher also, kenyu also lo. The pasuk says that just like the hitter did, so shall be done to him. Kenyu nosin bo lomali, then the pasuk says that it will be done to him, it will be given to him. Lomali, how come I have the pasuk of kenyu nosin bo if I already have kenyu also lo? So davar sheyesh bo nesina, something that is giving, umaynu mammon, and that is money. So we see that both by Edom Zomin and by Chova b'chaveru, specifically the Torah says that you can be chayav mammon rather than Makis. But in other cases, Rabbi Yochanan says that you be chayav Makis rather than mammon. And therefore, going back to Ones u'Mefate, when the Mishnah in Makis says that you be chayav for Makis, the lashes, that would be if you warned the fellow that you're going to be chayav lashes, then he would get lashes. But if they didn't warn him, so then he gets Makis. So then he gets mammon, which is what our Mishnah Ksubis is saying. For Rabbi Yochanan, my time lo omer ke'ula. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that when there's mammon and makis, you get makis rather than mammon. Why doesn't he hold like Ula, who says that it will be mammon rather than makis? So imkain bitalta evasachos cholo segale. So says Rabbi Yochanan, well, because the pasuk, right, there's a lav in the Torah, right? The pasuk says that what does it say? Don't reveal the nakedness of your sister. We learned about this in Masechta Yevamos, of course. So there's a lav, and a lav means lashes. And if you say, but there's also the fine of 50 shekels, and you pay the fine, you don't get the lashes, well then what's the point of the pasuk saying, what's the point of having a lav in the Torah if it's not, if the punishment for it, right, a lav equals lashes? And what's the point of having a lav if it doesn't actually mean anything? It doesn't mean what it generally should mean, which is that she gets lashes. But if you say it's mammon, then what's the point of the lav? But the Gemara pushes back against Rabbi Yochanan. But chova b'chaveru nami im ken bitata li Yosef pen Yosef. But also by chova b'chaveru, we say that if there's money and lashes, you pay money, you don't get lashes. So then why did we have a lav in the Torah? V'lo Yosef pen Yosef. Edim zomin nami. Also by edim zomin ken bitata v'yo im bin akos arosha. That by Edom Zomin also there's a lot, right? There's the mammon, but there's also the marks of what's in Bina Kosarash? Masechta Markus Mukminila by Edom Zomin. Okay, and in Bina Kosarash is where we learn out Lo Yosef Pen Yosef. No, but that's Chov B'Chaveru. But by Edom Zomin, I thought it was Losana Berecha Yitzchak. That's interesting. I wonder why they're saying that. But, okay, fine. But by Edom Zomin also, then what's the point of the lav by Edom Zomin if, that's interesting. Yeah, what's the point of the lav by Edom Zomin if, we're saying that they're just chayav mammon? So, Ella Edom Zomin efshur lekiyuma beben grusho ven chalutza. So by Edom Zomin, right, even though yes, we have this lav to say that they should get makis, what's that? That's talking about ben grusha ben chalutza. That is talking about the first Mishnah in Masechta Makis, which talks about what if you have witnesses and come say that we're testifying that a certain kohen is actually not a kohen, is a chalal. he's a ben grusha ben chalutza. Now they're basically ruining his life in a certain sense, right? He can no longer be treated as a kohen. He's now a cholol. He can't marry a bas kohen. He can't eat trumah, right? And it turns out that they're a bunch of liars. So what do? Do you say that they're cholols? I mean, they might not even be kohanim, right? So we say in that case they get malchus. So that's where by Edom Zom there's malchus. Dafka in the case of ben grusha ben chalutza. Chov b'chaveru nami. Also, when it comes to somebody who hits his friend, right? Yeah, we say that he's chayiv mammon, but there is still a case where he'd be chayiv makis, as we saw earlier. Right? We learned about if he hits him that it's less than a shavu puta, he's going to be chayiv makis. So we haven't completely missed out on the opportunity to give makis by chov b'chaveru achoso nami, and also by achoso ikalikuma b'achoso bogeres. You could say, well, if she's a bogeres, so then there's no fine, so then there's makis. So keilu. Rabbi Yochanan was saying that I can't hold like Ula, because if you say like Ula that you're chayiv mammon, then what do we do with these lavs? I can tell you, there's going to be ukimtas where there's going to be makis anyways, don't worry. So rather, no, Rabbi Yochanan says, you know why I can't hold like Ula? Rabbi Yochanan says, look, I can't hold like Ula, because Ula learns out mammon rather than makis from Gzeir Shova of tachas, and says, Rabbi Yochanan, I use that pasuk for like Abaye uses it, or he would say that he holds like Abaye. Abaye was younger than Rabbi Yochanan. The Abaye that says Abaye, Omer Kra, the pasuk says Tachas Asher Ina, that he gives the 50 shekels, Tachas Asher Ina. Dafka for the rape, for the ones is what he gives the 50 shekels for. Hai Tachas Asher Ina Michlal De'ika Boshus Ufagam. That meaning the 50 shekels is just for the ones. But there's other payments for other things. There's Boshus, there's Pagam, right? So he says Dafka is 50 shekels for the ones. But there's also going to be other charges. And that's for Boshes, Pigam. So Rabbi learns out from that pasuk that there are other things that he has to pay for in addition to the onus, in the 50 shekels. Ve'ula nafkale midirave. Ula learns out the other payments from Rave, like Rave learns out the Amar Rave, that Rave says, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, V'nosan ha'isha shochif ima la'avi anara chamishim kosef, that the fellow who slept with her gives 50 essentially shekels. Hano ashchiva chamishim b'chlal deika poshes upagam. He says, okay, so davka the shchiva, just for having slept with her, that's 50 shekels, but there's other payments for other things like poshes upagam that he would be chayiv for as well. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, from Tachas learns out like Abaye, but Ula learns out sort of the other payments like Rave, that from the shchiva, and he learns out Tachas to say that when there's makis and mammon, you'd be chayiv davke makis, according to Rabbi Yochanan. Well, according to Uli, you'd be chayiv mammon, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you'd be chayiv makis. Friends, that was Daf Lamed Beis Masechet Ksubis. Lemaisa, I gotta go pack and catch a flight. But the main machlokas here between Rabbi Yochanan and Ula revolved around when you have two things that you chayiv for, mammon and makis. What do you chayiv for? Ula says you chayiv mammon, whereas Rabbi Yochanan says you chayiv makis. Friends, peace out.